Hi guys, I'm Tommy. Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, it is a beautiful day. Summer is approaching. Obviously, you want your bike to be spotless, ready for those summer rides. You want it to be running smoothly. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to clean your bike on a budget, so you don't have to spend hundreds of pounds on cleaning gear. Not that anyone does, apart from the pros probably. This is how I clean my bike every single day. I'm just gonna crack straight on with the video and yeah, show you the equipment that I will be using. Here is the majority of the equipment that I use. There is the rest, 2 towels there, I'll mention them in a minute. A bucket of hot soapy water, simply put, washing up liquid. That's all you need. You don't need all this bike cleaner, you don't need that foam, you don't need nothing. You just need some fairy liquid or cheap washing up liquid. It works fine. You need a second bucket because you're gonna put some of this water into that bucket because you're going to use that bucket for your chain and you don't want to be mixing the two up. Unless you only have one bucket, then yeah, that's absolutely fine. We have 2 sponges. We have 1 sponge for our frame, which goes in there. That's quite satisfying. And then we have a second sponge for our chain, which goes in there. Well, we missed, but you know. Right, muck off. Now, yes, this is the most expensive part of the bike clean. It's not very budget friendly. You can get cheaper stuff. It does work just as well, I guess, but this is just so easy to use. It gets rid of that oil so easily. I highly recommend you invest in this. Washing up liquid, it won't do anything to the oil. It will just move it around. It won't actually pick it up off the chain. Whereas this, so easy, and it lasts quite a long time as well, so it's actually quite budget friendly in a way. You only need 1 brush, I'd say, but you can use nail brushes, which might work out cheaper than this multi-brush thing. This is also quite cheap, but these could be cheaper. The last thing of this kind of area is the hose. Obviously you want water to hose your bike down with. Over here we have a old towel to dry our drivetrain off with. And finally, we have our main towel to dry the wheels and the frame, the saddle and the handlebars. Now it's important to add, with your towel, make sure it's a microfiber one. You don't want to be using a regular towel on your paintwork because it will mark it, it will scratch it over time, and in the sunlight it will look a little bit nasty. You'll thank me later for it. So that is the equipment. Super simple, very cheap, unlike the drivetrain cleaner, which is a bit more expensive, but like I said, it lasts a very long time. So now we've finished talking through the equipment that we're going to be using. I'm also going to mention a bike stand can be very helpful. My bike does move around a bit when I'm cleaning the chain especially. Mine's broken, unfortunately. They can be quite cheap, and I remember seeing it in Aldi for like 25 quid. If you've got one, use it, it's easy. Let's get on with the video. So, if you're like me and you have 2 buckets, you're going to start off with your drivetrain. Now, if you have only 1 bucket, you're not going to start with the drivetrain, you're going to start with the frame. So once you've cleaned your frame, then you're going to clean your chain afterwards. The reason being, if you clean your chain first with this bucket of water, your bucket of water is going to be oily, and then you're going to be putting your clean sponge in and clean your frame and your rotors. They're going to get oily, and then you won't be able to stop, and your bike's going to look filthy again, and it'll be very annoying. You have to do the whole process again, and you don't want that. But because I've got 2 buckets, I'm starting with the drivetrain. So when you're cleaning your drivetrain, you want to make sure your chain is halfway down the cassette, so that way when you're backpedaling, it's not going to jump off the cassette and into an odd gear. That way your chain doesn't get all stuck and stuff on the cassette. With our drivetrain cleaner, backpedal and spray on the drivetrain cleaner onto the cassette, and this will also coat the chain as well. Now you don't need loads of this stuff. You're going to get to your second bucket, and with your first bucket you're going to tip in not loads of water because you don't need loads of water, and with your brush you are going to clean your cassette like this first, moving to our jockey wheels. And after a couple of brushes, it's looking pretty shiny already. The reason why I prefer this tool over the nail brushes is because we can get into difficult spaces like the rear derailleur. Now I pull my rear derailleur down, give it a good old scrub on the inside, and try and get into all the little gaps where the muck tries to sit and hide from you. Moving to the front of the drivetrain, spray once or twice onto the chain set and the front derailleur, grabbing our brush again, working that cleaner in nicely. Now for the chain rings, you're going to grab your sponge. Now back pedal and pinch the teeth. Now be very careful, you don't want to cut yourself on the teeth. I've done it many a time and it's horrible. Whilst we've got our sponge out, we can go ahead and wipe down the derailleur and the front mech. Now, as you can see, my bike is moving around, which is why a bike stand can be handy. Whilst we are also at the rear derailleur, I am going to clean the jockey wheels off with my sponge. In addition to the chainring, you want to clean the whole crank arm itself whilst you are here. Now, a lot of dirt sits behind the actual crank arm, in between the chainring and the crank arm, so make sure you get in behind it. Sometimes it is actually easier to do this part with a brush, because the brush obviously gets in a bit further behind. Now, you mustn't forget the inner chainring. Now, the easiest way to clean that, change gear into the big sprocket, grab our brush, or sponge should I say, and put it up against the inside of the chainring, and we're going to clean the inside of the small ring at the front. You can go over it once again with your sponge if you want to, just to get off any excess dirt that's come off. We can finally clean our chain now, so we're going to get our sponge and we're just going to pinch the chain and back pedal, pinching it from the side as well as the top. That way we get the side of the links and also the rolly bits in the center of the chain as well. Now, with your hose, you're going to wash off the drivetrain. Now, you don't want to be too close or too harsh with it, just like a light shower, because you don't want to damage the wheel bearings or the bottom bracket bearings. That's the drivetrain done. And we can finally move on to the frame and the wheels and any other components on the bike. Making sure your sponge is very saturated with soapy water, we are going to wash our bike away. Now, but you want to start off at the top of the bike, preferably, and work your way down. There is no right or wrong way of doing this. It's very simple. You can do it in whatever order you want. I just find it easier to go from top to bottom. And you can be as thorough or as lazy as you want as well. I'm very particular with my bike cleaning, so I like to be quite thorough, and I like to know that I'm going to be as fast as I possibly can on every single training session I do. With the fork, now it's quite difficult to get underneath in between the fork and the top of the tyre. So what I do is I get my sponge, I kind of pinch my wheel like so, flatten the sponge out, and I roll my tyre backwards, and it forces the sponge through. Now, this might be difficult depending on what size tyre you've got. I've got 25mm tyres, so the gap is reasonably big. So if you have 28 or 30mm tyres, that gap's gonna be smaller and harder to do that. But it works. And the same with the wheel hubs. If you can't get in, get your sponge, or even a brush if you've got one, like a clean, non-oily brush. But with your sponge, you can rotate it round the hubs like so. But if you're doing this, then you might as well do a deep clean, I guess, and take your wheels off. But that's for another video. Whilst we are at our hub area of the bike, when I'm cleaning my disc rotors, if you pick your bike up a little bit and spin the wheel, push up against the outside of the rotor, but do this very gently. You don't want to actually bend the rotor because they can be very delicate. And to clean the inside of the rotor, pick the bike up, spin it again. Careful with your fingers, you don't want to catch them in the spokes. Get your sponge on the inside and yeah, it kind of gets caught in there. I don't know how to describe this, but yeah, if you see what I'm doing, copy it. It's quite helpful. To clean your caliper, you've got spokes that end up being in the way. Spin your wheel until you find the gap of the spokes is in the right place for you to get your sponge in on the inside, and this allows you to clean the brake dust off your calipers. I would also like to mention, when you're cleaning your left crank arm, be careful. Here is the bottom bracket area. Now, you don't want to wash the grease out, and also you don't want to get grease on your sponge. So clean the outside of the crank arm as you'd normally do, but whatever you do, now I'm gonna do this for your educational purposes. Don't pinch it and spin it around, because if you've got fresh grease in there, look, you can see I've just got grease on my sponge there and there. Now you're going to end up getting that on your rotors and your caliper. You don't want to do that. So I'm going to make sure that I now spin my brush around. I keep calling it a brush, it's a sponge. And I'm going to use it to clean the rest of the bike, like so. When cleaning the back of the bike, you do want to be careful. Yes, you've cleaned your chain, it's clean, but it's not spotless. You can't eat your dinner off it, can you? Making sure I'm using the clean side, not the side that I just got grease on. Start with your rotor, then work your way outwards. So I'm going to do the same process as I did with the front wheel. I'm going to pick the bike up and I'm actually going to push down on the pedal to get the wheel going, pushing up against the outside of the rotor. Gonna push down on the pedal again, being really careful not to get my fingers trapped in the spokes, because we don't want to be going to hospital to get a finger put back on because we've chopped it off. To clean the top of the tyre, the side of the tyre and the rim at the same time, pinch your sponge around it and you can work your way around the wheel like so. Depending on how fussy you want to be, you can then work your way to the spokes. And these spokes are on the back wheel are going to be very oily because all the lube that you use to lube your chain with flicks up around the side of the rim and the spokes. So yeah, you want to keep an eye on your sponge, make sure it doesn't get too oily, and yeah, go from there. But if you want to, just simply wipe the spokes. It's that simple. You don't need to worry about it too much. Now that all the intricate bits are clean, I'm literally going to wipe down the rest of my frame, and I'm gonna go over the bits that I've already done because I've left them a little bit and I'm sure the dirt's dried back on. And obviously with the rear triangle, again, just go careful. You don't want to get your sponge oily by touching the cassette here or the chain. This is also a difficult bit to clean behind the chainring. I wouldn't worry too much unless you're doing a deep clean before a race, etc. You're taking the chain set off to clean your bump bracket. Then when you're doing that, you are able to get behind there and clean it. That's a good time to do it. Don't do it now. It's not worth it. You're just going to go through sponges like there's literally no tomorrow. Now we finished cleaning the bike, it's time to go through the parts of the bike that we need to be careful of when hosing down. So I mentioned before about the bottom bracket. You want to be careful with that. But I'm going to start from scratch. Here we have rear hub bearings and we have jockey wheel bearings, bottom bracket bearings in the frame, both sides, so yeah, be careful. Front of the bike, we have front wheel bearings. Up here, we have two headset bearings, one that sits here, one that sits here. So don't direct water straight at there because they will get ruined. And also, not a bearing, but something you do want to be careful of. With your seat post, you don't want this part to get rusty. It's like an expander plug. And yeah, this is how grit can get forced in, and also water just corrodes it, and yeah, you will ruin this part, and it's a real pain to pull your seat post out if it gets stuck. Now without further ado, let's hose it off. Time for our oily old towel. We want to dry the chain and the chain set off first, because it's important that when we use our main towel, which, oh man, this is not good for filming purposes, just pretend you didn't see it on the floor. We don't want to get a nice clean towel that hasn't been on a floor dirty and oily because it's up against a chain that's wet. Get your dirty towel and start by basically, imagine you're cleaning the chain but just drying it instead. Now the reason why it's so important to dry the chain is because your chain is very prone to rusting. So if you do not lubricate your chain after and dry your chain, it's it's going to rust. Now using our towel that hasn't been on the floor, has been washed and is clean, we are going to dry the bike off. Now I start at the top on the saddle and I work my way down. Now I have a really good top tip. This top tip has saved me quite a bit of time, and it's also a really good opportunity to listen to the crisp, sweet sound of your free hub. Move the bike somewhere so you're not going to hit anything, you're not going to smash a spoke because it gets stuck in something, I don't know. But pick your bike up and pedal, right? And as you can see, amazingly, it's dry, because the wheel's been spinning in the air. It gives a chance for the tyres to dry and the rims to dry too. It also gives a chance for the disc rotor to dry, and when you're pedaling the cassette, the water flings off the cassette. The only downside is I forgot, I've already dried my saddle and my seat post in that, so the water does flick up onto that, so I'm gonna have to dry that again. But that takes 2 seconds, doesn't it? And also, like I said, it's a lovely opportunity to listen to your free hub, especially when you've got race wheels. Oh, honestly, the best sound in my opinion. I let it run even longer than it has to, just so I can listen to it for longer. And it's like a loud car. In the morning or at night when I'm cleaning the bike, yeah, the neighbours hate me because it's so loud and it's probably quite disturbing. Now, I do wish it was the same process for the front wheel. It's not. Get your towel and push it up against the rim on one side and repeat the process on the other. The very last part of cleaning your bike is some lube. Oh, I've missed a bit. I've missed a bit on the bike drying. Any sort of lubrication will work. Obviously, in the dry weather, use dry lube. Wet weather, use wet lube. It doesn't really matter what lube you use unless it is raining. If you use dry lube when it's raining, it will wash off, and your components, like your teeth on each of the sprockets, they will wear down quicker and it will be quite costly for you. So with your lube, you're just gonna put 1 drop on each of the links, like so, or you can just go ahead and wing it. Even after you've dried the bike, there still ends up being water left on the floor after 10 minutes or so. For example, lube will drip off the chain onto the floor, and especially if you've got wooden floors, you need to be careful because you'll ruin your floors. Now, I've got a water exit hole under the bike. Just flip my camera around so you can see it. I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is a hole there so that water that is inside the bike has a way to exit the bike. Now, this always means that when I leave the bike inside after I've cleaned it, there is a puddle of water. So I always make sure I've put a towel underneath it, otherwise it will rot the floors. So yeah, don't do that. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. It wasn't a deep clean, it wasn't an advanced clean, it was just to get your bike so it's nice to ride again. It's not like getting in all the tiny little areas of your bike to make sure it is spotless, because there's parts of the bike that's still gonna be a bit mucky. For example, behind the bottom bracket area where the chain stays are, that's still quite mucky. Make sure you like, share and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you did. Let me know what you want to see next. And yeah, I hope you have the weather we are having today. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one with another wicked video.